what if the exact skills that made you successful are, the very things guaranteeing you will never have another original thought again?
Yeah, that's a terrifying concept to start with.
Right. I mean, think about that for a second. Usually when we talk about acquiring expertise or just becoming really good at something, we treat it like building a fortress.
Oh, absolutely.
You lay the bricks of knowledge, you reinforce the walls with experience, and eventually you have this impenetrable structure of competence. It feels solid. It feels secure.
The problem with that fortress, though, is that the very walls you build to protect yourself from failure eventually end up locking you inside.
Wow. Yeah.
When you examine the actual lived experience of highly creative, perpetually vibrant people, that fortress of expertise looks less like a sanctuary and, well, much more like a trap. The landscape of human brilliance is entirely counterintuitive to how we are taught to pursue success.
Which is exactly why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. You're probably commuting, gearing up for a meeting,
Yeah.
or maybe you just have an insatiable curiosity. Well, we have something incredible curated just for you today.
We really do.
Our mission today is to explore a fascinating, densely packed essay from our source material titled The Mind That Will Not Tighten.
It's such a great title.
It really is. And we're going to uncover the mechanics behind remaining creatively, emotionally, and philosophically open throughout an entire lifetime. And, more importantly, how to avoid that suffocating trap of mental rigidity.
To set the stage for all of this, we should probably look at the core premise laid out by Margaret A. Bowden in the material.
Yeah, let's start there.
So she completely demystifies brilliance by pointing out that creativity is not magic. It isn't some divine spark handed down to a few lucky geniuses.
Right, it's not just hitting the genetic lottery.
Exactly. Instead, she defines it simply as practiced expertise combined with enduring motivation.
Practice expertise and enduring motivation.
Yes. The exceptional person isn't born fundamentally different. They are just driven differently, and they figure out how to sustain that drive over decades without burning out.
So the flame doesn't burn brighter, it just refuses to go out.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this immediately introduces a massive mechanical problem for the human brain.
It does.
If you absolutely need expertise to be creative, how do you gain that deep expertise without getting entirely trapped by it?
Well, you have to look at the biological and psychological mechanisms at play here. The essay draws on Ryan Holiday and Robert Greene's concept of mastery to explain this.
Oh, right.
We often hear the phrase that the mind is a muscle. But unlike your biceps, which gets stronger and more flexible with use, the mind actually tightens with habitual use.
Wicked Titans.
Yeah, it comes down to cognitive economy. The human brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's energy. So biologically, it is desperate to automate tasks and conserve calories.
Make things easier.
Right. It naturally seeks the comfort of familiar thoughts, creating these deeply rutted neural pathways. The harder you work on a problem, the narrower and more rigid your focus gets to save energy. Progress literally produces limitation.
Yeah, it's like walking through a forest.
How so?
Well, expertise clears a really efficient, comfortable hiking trail. Every route, every turn, every elevation change, it feels incredibly safe.
Yes.
But if you only ever walk that specific trail because it's comfortable and efficient, you completely stop seeing the rest of the forest.
You don't even know it's there anymore.
Right. The unknown becomes terrifying simply because it's off the path you spent years clearing. But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Isn't avoiding the unknown or avoiding the hot stove, so to speak, just basic biological common sense?
Sure.
Why should we fight our own survival instincts? Like, if a trail is full of bears, you stay on the safe path.
Well, that tension you're describing is the central paradox of mastery. To address why we must fight that instinct, the material brings in a brilliant parable from Anthony DeMello.
I love this part.
Yeah, he tells the story of a jilted lover who declares he is never going to fall in love again to avoid the pain of a broken heart.
A classic reaction.
Right. And the master replies, "You are like the cat who, having burned itself on a hot stove, refused to ever sit down again, anywhere."
Not just on the stove. Anywhere.
Exactly. The survival instinct you mentioned is completely rational in the micro sense. It makes perfect sense to avoid the specific hot stove that burned you.
Obviously.
But what we do psychologically, what the cat does, is totalize the experience. We mistake a single data point of pain for a universal truth.
Wow. Yeah, we generalize the trauma.
We write permanent restrictive laws for our entire lives from the ashes of one bad experience. De Mello isn't arguing that the stove doesn't hurt. He's warning against the calcified habit of avoidance that turns a perfectly good defense mechanism into a comfortable prison.
A comfortable prison. So we essentially use our own intelligence to build the bars.
Yes, beautifully said.
We get so smart that we justify never taking a risk again because we have the data to prove it might hurt.
And that destroys Bowden's requirement for enduring motivation. Enduring motivation requires immense emotional endurance. You have to be willing, after every single burn, to return to the stove.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is. The material highlights Michael Jordan to illustrate this. His legendary mindset wasn't built on the delusion that he would never fail.
Right.
He explicitly stated that he could absolutely accept failure. What he could not accept was not trying again. That is the essence of a mind that will not tighten.
So you have to keep trying.
There is no creativity, no growth, and no mastery without the deliberate willingness to return to the source of potential failure.
So we have this intense internal battle. We have to constantly force ourselves to step off the safe trail. We have to risk burning our hands on the stove just to stay creative and open. But here's where it gets really interesting. How do we maintain that vulnerability while also handling the absolute inevitable chaos of the outside world without losing our minds?
Right, because the world won't make it easy.
Because the world is full of people and events constantly trying to throw us off balance.
Well, if we look at how the essay structures this, it presents a stoic framework for surviving outer and inner chaos. It breaks it down into 3 acts.
Okay.
The first major example is centered on the Roman Emperor Nero, and this goes far beyond ancient history. It's a diagnosis of a pathology we see in modern leadership all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Nero was fundamentally incapable of governing himself, so he governed his empire through weaponized distraction and chaos.
Weaponized distraction.
Yes. He flooded the zone with nonsense, outrage, and constant unpredictability, specifically to keep everyone around him off balance and reacting to his terms.
Blurring the line between what's a serious threat and what's just theatrical absurdity.
That is the exact tactic. Now, Nero's tutor was Seneca, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers in history.
Right, a brilliant guy.
But Seneca fell into a massive trap that highly competent people often fall into. He tried to manage the damage.
Oh, man.
He believed his intellect could outmaneuver Nero's chaos, so he engaged with it to fix it. In doing so, he simply became an enabler to the arsonist.
So he got pulled into the game.
Exactly. The core mechanical lesson here is that you cannot defeat external chaos on its own terms. If you engage with madness, you adopt its rules.
Right.
To resist it, you must first completely command yourself and refuse to play the game.
Are we all acting like Seneca today?
What do you mean?
I mean, think about the modern workplace or even our social circles. Do we trick ourselves into thinking we can, like, manage or fix toxic systems, toxic bosses, or toxic people, when engaging with them on their terms just makes us complicit in the chaos?
The material strongly suggests that we do. We suffer from the hubris of competence.
The hubris of competence.
Yeah, we think we can fix a toxic corporate culture by working harder within it, but the chaos just consumes that extra effort. You have to step back and reclaim your own inner real estate.
That makes a lot of sense.
Which brings us to Act 2, the next historical parallel the essay draws. The Antonine Plague of Marcus Aurelius's Rome compared directly to the modern COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Marcus Aurelius noted something profound during his crisis. He observed that every societal shock produces 2 distinct pestilences.
Okay, what are they?
There is the bodily illness, the literal virus, and then there is the inner infection of character.
Oh, like the cowardice, the selfishness, the hoarding of supplies, the panic.
The sudden loss of basic empathy, yes. Years after our own recent pandemic, the physical illness might have receded into the background of daily life. But the essay asks a piercing question.
Which is?
Which pestilence did you catch? Has the spiritual residue of panic, tribalism, and selfishness lingered even after the virus faded?
That is a heavy question.
It is. Maintaining a mind that won't tighten means actively fighting off that inner infection of character, refusing to let an external crisis permanently alter your internal decency.
So how do we fight it? If you need a tool to cut through both Nero's manufactured chaos and the plague's genuine panic, where do we look?
Well, the material points to the ultimate perspective shift in Act 3, death.
Okay.
The essay quotes the critic Edmund Wilson, who noted that death is the only prophecy that never fails. And it pairs that with Steve Jobs' famous Stanford commencement speech about the clarity that comes from carrying a terminal diagnosis.
Right, the memento mori concept.
Exactly, the ancient practice of memento mori, remembering you will die. Throughout history, people have carried physical reminders of this. A piece of 17th century art, an Alcoholics Anonymous chip, or a Stoic medallion kept in a pocket.
Wait, carrying a coin that literally says you will die around in your pocket. That sounds incredibly depressing, especially for a modern audience. How does that not just cause massive anxiety? How is staring at your own mortality supposed to help you stay open?
It sounds morbid until you understand the psychological mechanism behind it. It isn't about obsessing over the end, it's the ultimate clarifying mechanism for the present.
Clarifying how.
When you physically carry a reminder of your own finitude, the nonsense of Nero's chaos, the office politics, the social media outrage, the petty grievances, completely loses its grip on your nervous system.
Because you realize it just doesn't matter.
You realize you simply don't have time to wait out the chaos or engage in endless battles of ego. It forces prioritization. The anxiety actually drops because the trivial things no longer demand your energy.
It burns away everything that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So we've got these concepts for private internal self-command. But it's one thing to sit alone in a room, holding a coin, contemplating your mortality and finding peace.
Right.
How does this philosophy hold up in the ultimate test lab? I'm talking about the family. When you aren't just managing your own reactions, but you are entirely responsible for molding another human being.
The family unit is the absolute crucible for these ideas. The essay approaches this from a few different angles, all pointing to a singular, brutal truth. What you model matters infinitely more than what you teach.
Oh, absolutely.
The most striking historical example is the direct comparison between Marcus Aurelius and Nero. On paper, their early lives were remarkably similar.
Okay.
Both lost their fathers at a very young age. Both were assigned brilliant Stoic tutors. Marcus had Rusticus, Nero had Seneca. Both were thrust into the pipeline for absolute power over the Roman Empire.
So their environmental inputs were practically identical.
On the surface, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the historian Barry Strauss points out the massive varying factor in their development: their mothers.
Interesting.
Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that his mother was so generous and simple in her way of life that she couldn't even conceive of doing wrong.
Wow. And Nero's mother.
Nero's mother, Agrippina, was notoriously ambitious, highly calculating, and deeply cruel.
Well, that explains a lot.
Furthermore, Marcus had a stepfather, Antoninus, who modeled decent, consistent, steady leadership every single day. No theoretical philosophy seminar could teach Marcus what Antoninus showed him just by being a decent human being handling daily frustrations without losing his temper.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Because there's a glaring irony here.
What's that?
Well, Marcus Aurelius is the literal philosopher king. He wrote the defining book on Stoicism. Yet his own son, Commodus, turned out to be an absolute monster who undid the entire empire.
It's a tragic piece of history.
Doesn't Commodus's failure prove that all this intellectual knowledge and philosophy is completely useless if it doesn't translate perfectly into the next generation?
It doesn't prove that philosophy is useless. It proves that the transmission of virtue is incredibly fragile.
Fragile.
Yes. Parenting, or any form of true leadership, is fundamentally harder than governing an empire because you cannot delegate your example. You are always on stage.
Always on stage.
Commodus didn't fail because Marcus's philosophy was wrong on paper. He failed because virtue cannot be lectured into someone. It must be absorbed through constant, lived example in the moments that matter most.
Which is so hard to do.
It requires an embodiment of principles that is exhausting to maintain. This brings us to a modern, incredibly powerful example from the material. NFL wide receiver Marquise Lee.
This was during the height of the pandemic in the 2020 season, right?
Yes. Marquise Lee made a decision with disarming simplicity that perfectly illustrates this embodied virtue. He opted out of the 2020 NFL season.
Which is huge.
He passed on playing for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, which is a massive career opportunity for any player.
Why did he do it?
Because the strict COVID protocols meant his young daughter couldn't attend the games or be around him during the season.
Oh, wow.
Lee grew up without a father. He made a deliberate, incredibly costly choice not to replicate that generational absence. He knew the NFL would still be there, but that specific formative season of his daughter's life would not.
He broke the cycle, and he did it on a massive public stage.
He broke the cycle at immense professional and financial cost. And that ties directly into the legendary basketball coach John Witter's foundational rule.
Which is?
Your most powerful leadership tool isn't your speech, your rules, or your written philosophy. It is your personal example, specifically when that example costs you something tangible.
Because anyone can model good behavior when it's easy or profitable.
Exactly. True modeling happens when the stakes are high and you have to sacrifice your own ambition.
To consistently model that kind of action over an entire lifetime? I mean, to constantly return to the hot stove, to ignore the chaos, to break generational cycles. Doing all of that without burning out requires an endless fuel source.
It does.
And the essay identifies that fuel as zeal, paired with a completely non-transactional approach to other people.
Yes, Charles Buxton articulated this by saying that experience shows success is due less to ability than to zeal. This loops right back to Bowden's quote at the very beginning about enduring motivation. The initial spark of talent is just the starting line. Zeal is the actual race. It's what Steve Martin meant with his famous advice, be so good they can't ignore you.
Which people usually think is about talent.
But it isn't a quote about innate genius. It's about relentless, sustained, zealous work. Zeal is the psychological engine that forces you over the grueling threshold of mastery when everyone else quits because it stopped being fun.
Confucius had a sharp insight on this mechanism too. He said a healthy man wants 1,000 things, but a sick man only wants one thing.
That's incredibly profound.
Yeah. When you strip away all the modern distractions, the networking, the status anxiety, the comfort, what is the one thing that keeps you going? It's that zealous capacity to relentlessly pursue understanding without getting distracted by the 1,000 shiny things on the periphery.
But having zeal in isolation isn't enough. The material emphasizes the absolute necessity of integrating that pursuit into your tangible actions.
Okay, integration.
Thucydides warned that a society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. You cannot keep wisdom in a separate, sterile room from your daily actions. The golf coach Bob Tosky used a brilliant kinesthetic analogy to explain this integration.
What was the analogy?
He said a great golf swing requires the upper body and the lower body to move beautifully together. If they are out of sync, the swing falls apart. Integration of thought and act is the whole game.
You know, that golf analogy actually makes me think of how we handle relationships.
How so?
If your upper and lower body are out of sync in golf, you miss the ball entirely. In a relationship, if your actions and your internal expectations are out of sync because you're secretly keeping score, the relationship fails.
Oh, absolutely.
The essay talks about taking 100% responsibility in relationships with zero expectations in return. Transactional love is like playing a game of tennis, where both players are just staring intently at the scoreboard instead of actually watching the ball.
That's a great image.
You're so obsessed with who served last, who owes who a favor, that the game completely stops.
That is the perfect visualization of modern networking and social culture. Everything is tracked. When you stare at the scoreboard, you stop playing the game.
Exactly.
The ledger replaces the love, and the painful psychological irony is that the more meticulously you keep that score tracking what you give versus what you get, the less you actually receive.
Because people can feel it.
People sense the accounting, they sense the transaction, and they retreat. Love and genuine connection only circulate when no one is counting.
Which is completely counter to our "what have you done for me lately" corporate culture. It feels dangerous to drop the ledger.
It does feel dangerous, which is why the Apostle Paul framed this as a profound spiritual and psychological constitution. He contrasted a spirit of fear with a spirit of power, love, and self-control.
Those concepts are deeply intertwined.
They are. Scorekeeping love is simply fearful love. It's the fear of being taken advantage of, the fear of losing out, the fear of asymmetry.
Right.
Marquise Lee stepping away from the NFL was the ultimate modern example of love without scorekeeping. He didn't calculate the return on investment. He didn't ask if his toddler would even remember the sacrifice. He just provided what he hadn't received himself.
He took full responsibility with zero expectation of a payout. It takes the exact same courage required to hold that memento mori coin. You have to act from your deepest values without demanding a guaranteed return from the universe.
And that brings us to the final, almost ironic warning at the end of the essay, drawn from the ancient philosophers Epictetus and Plutarch.
What's the warning?
Epictetus basically challenges his students by saying, eat like a human, marry, have children, get involved in politics, endure an annoying neighbor.
Basically, just live a normal life.
Exactly. He says, show us how you handle these incredibly mundane, everyday actions so we can see if you've actually learned a single thing from philosophy.
Stop quoting the books and show me your life.
Exactly the point. Plutarch echoed this sentiment. Reading these 24 invitations to live differently, whether they come from a Roman emperor navigating a plague, a Buddhist parable about a cat, a modern athlete breaking a cycle, or a golf coach talking about integration, it is entirely meaningless if the knowledge stays safely locked in your notebook.
The notebook is just the preparation phase.
Right. The messy, unpredictable day itself is the actual test.
We've talked entirely about preparing your mind for the chaos of the world. But when you put this deep dive away and walk into your next unpredictable, frustrating conversation today, will you be able to recognize your own hot stove in real time?
That is the real challenge.
And more importantly, will you have the courage to put your hand back on it anyway? Think about that as you go through your day. Keep your mind open, keep it untightened, and we will catch you on the next one.